Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more History Matters. This time, the short animated documentary on why did Sweden and Norway break up? Why did the soulmates split apart? I don't know the answer. Before we dive in, though, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Not gonna say anything before the video, really. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. Let's get the answer here.
Breakups are never easy, especially when your ex goes on to become a wealthy petrostate.
Yeah.
But this is what happened to Sweden, which was in a union with Norway for almost a century until their split in 1905. But what caused this dissolution? Why did Sweden and Norway break up? So, as of the closing years of the Napoleonic Wars, Norway was a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, whose ruler Frederick VI had just sided with Napoleon. Now, a lot of countries in Europe had done the same previously, like Russia, who had used Swedish closeness with Britain as justification to invade it and grab Finland for its own. Soon after this, Russia decided that it didn't like Napoleon anymore, and so it was time for new allies. The Swedish king wasn't doing much because of a heart attack, but his government did sense an opportunity. Finland wasn't coming back, but by siding with the coalition against Napoleon and his Danish ally, Sweden could gain Norway. Something which Britain, Russia and Prussia agreed to, and even the Danish king agreed to its loss providing he got to keep Greenland and Iceland. The people of Norway were not happy with suddenly being the subjects of the Swedish king, and so the Prince of Denmark, called Christian because of course he was, declared himself the king of
I love the dry, sarcasm. Because of course he was.
Norway in 1814 and proclaimed its independence. Against the Allies he stood no chance of succeeding, but whilst they were busy fighting Napoleon there was an opportunity to win political support. And he turned to Britain, whom he felt would recognise the plight of the Norwegian people and do the right thing to stop them from being handed over to a foreign king. But fun fact, no. Tensions rose and when this...
Hold on. In what sense of the world... In any world where Britain is on top, as they are right now, what the fuck makes you think Britain will actually care about the plight of a foreign people being occupied by a foreign occupier? Like, the only reason they cared about Napoleon was because he was disrupting British hegemony in Europe. They did not want a continental hegemony against them. They benefited from a disunified Europe. If Europe went, here's the thing. If it weren't for Portugal and Russia pretty much not going with Napoleon's plan on blockading the British, if all of Europe had stuck to Napoleon's plan, the British, I think, would have been absolutely fucked. I don't think the British could, because that's where they mainly trade with, right? They get their resources from their colonies and then they sell those manufactured goods to, their interior and to the Europeans. My dogs are barking a lot, but I'm going to keep talking. As I was saying, I don't think the British really could have, the British sold their goods to Europe, their manufactured goods to Europe. I think if the entire continent stuck to the whole Napoleon's plan on blockading them, I don't think there was anything really the British could have done, because the British don't have especially in the early 1800s, do not have the manpower available to them to launch a mass invasion on a unified Europe. If Europe was stuck to Napoleon's plans, agreed with it, worked with him, there's nothing the British could have done. But, that's not what happened. But anyways, yeah, Norway, Prince Christian. The fuck? What makes you think this? The British literally only cared about the plight of the other European nations because Napoleon was a threat to their fucking global dominance of the world. That's the only reason they fucking cared.
The Swedish came to claim their prize, fighting broke out. This lasted for about 2 weeks and ended with the Swedish making some concessions in return for Norway joining the Union voluntarily. Norway would keep its semi-democratic constitution, the king's powers there would be limited, and Norway would maintain separate armed forces. Relations between the two states improved over the next half a century, with the Swedish-based kings presenting a much more conciliatory tone to the Norwegian subjects. Although by doing this they angered Swedish politicians, who saw Norway as the junior partner in the Union, and many there feared that Norway would never be placated and would simply keep asking for more. And they weren't wrong. Norwegian politicians kept asking for more autonomy over the course of the late 19th century. The big one was when in 1891 Norwegian elections saw the Liberal Party victorious. The Liberals were proponents of Norwegian independence, but if that couldn't be achieved then they demanded separate foreign and trade policy for Norway. This was a big no-no since at that point the Union would essentially be dead. The Norwegian government made a formal request for these new powers and the Swedish responded with a well-formulated dead.
Hold on.
The Norwegian government made a
From Norway.
formal request for these new powers and the Swedish responded with a well-formulated logical argument. No, and if you keep asking, we're going to invade. The Liberals backed down and over the next decade instead opted to focus on Norway. They removed any reference to the Union from their flag, massively increased the size of the armed forces and built up border defences in case of an invasion.
Made in Albania. I love it.
And in retaliation, the Swedish ended free trade between the two and imposed tariffs on products from Britain, Norway's largest trade partner. It was 1905 that marked the death of the Union, though.
Sweden-Norway Union, 1814 to 1905. Why did we think this could work?
When the Norwegian government passed a law establishing itself as
No,
it was
you gotta
1905
say,
that marked the death of
like, the aesthetic of that Union flag right there, I fucking like it. I really like that. Like, that's a cool little design right there. Really nice.
the Union, though, when the Norwegian government passed a law establishing itself as separate diplomatic service. The king vetoed this, the government resigned, the king refused to accept their resignation or appoint a new government, and as such, the Norwegians argued that he was in violation of the constitution by leaving Norway without leadership, and in response, the Norwegian parliament declared its independence. In response, Sweden mobilised, which led Norway to do the same, and both armies sat on the border facing off. Swedish politicians and commanders were ready for war, and it was only when the Swedish people were overwhelmingly against military action that they backed down. This
Have to include the Swedish chef, huh?
support was largely due to the Norwegian referendum in which 99.9% of voters backed independence, which made it clear to everyone that Sweden could no longer force Norway to stay. As such, the Swedish people threatened mutiny in the army and the general strike if Norway was invaded, which meant that King Oscar II had no choice but to acknowledge the end of the Union. The Norwegian people then voted for a Prince of Denmark to become King of Norway, and thus, after a mere 500 years of being controlled by a foreign power, Norway would once again be an independent state.
With a prince from a foreign power. Norway, what the fuck?
I hope you enjoyed this episode with a special thanks to my patrons, James Bizanet.
Why would you choose a Danish prince? Ew. Danish. It. They're the worst of the Nordic people. That was Why Did Sweden and Norway Break Up? Short animated documentary. And this was good. This wasn't one of their better. I would say this is the average I would expect from History Matters in terms of quality and information relayed. It definitely it felt as though it may have been actually lacking a bit of some of the nuance or extra bits of information that a lot of their other short animated documentaries seem to have. This one felt like it was a bit less and more. It was more focused entirely on Sweden and Norway breakup. Whereas like I felt like we got in the video on the August coup, which was 2 minutes longer than this. That one felt like it had more context squeezed into it than this one did. But again, as I said, this is like the average I would expect from History Matters, the quality average, which means still very fucking good, still very top fucking tier. But yeah, this is a good like average video. I would like good quality. When I go into History Matters, this is my minimum expectation from them. At least that's how I view things. My minimum expectation is always like an average. So then, like, you know, if they have a weaker episode, then it's below the average, and that's not what I expect for them. Yeah, I don't know why I'm explaining things like that. I'm padding runtime. That was Why Did Sweden and Norway Break Up? A short anime documentary. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.